organizations. We have leaders and mantras that are telling us to trust leadership, trust the track they're taking, trust that they have the capacity to do what they have the role to do. And that doesn't always work out, right? In our organizations, a lot of times we are working for leaders that aren't necessarily trustworthy. And I'm wondering how each of you have experienced that, how you've navigated it personally and professionally. Could you speak to that?
I want to approach it from the perspective of those of us who are under authority and under leadership. That I want to ask a question. When we sense that we can't trust our leader, what's behind that? Do we think they're untrustworthy or incompetent based on our criteria or according to God's criteria? And so how are we determining whether or not we can trust our leader or not? Is it something heretical that's happening that needs to be confronted in a church setting, for example? Is it something unethical or even immoral in a leadership context that needs to be confronted? What's the criteria? Or is it that we made a suggestion and they didn't follow through with it or choose that, and our feelings are hurt, so therefore we can't trust our leader? Let's re-examine that.
Yeah.
I want to dig in a little bit more there, Eric, because that's exactly where most of us are.
When we're in a relationship under authority of someone in leadership that we can see according to God's standards, they're not trustworthy, but yet they keep saying, trust them, trust me, trust me, trust me, or trust the direction we're going. It's very frustrating. It's very difficult. And what I've had to do is go to God's word. And some of the leaders that I've been under over 25 years of pastoral ministry, some of the leaders that I've been under have been exhibiting foolish behavior, unwise in some of the decision-making processes. And so I go back to the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is full of how to engage foolishness. A lot of warnings, a lot of perspective. And one of those is Proverbs chapter 12. The way of a fool seems right to him, but a wise man listens to advice or counsel. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you are under the authority of a leader that's not leading with wisdom and acting foolishly, seek counsel, listen to advice, go to God's word. And then the one question I always come to, it boils down to this: what's the most loving and gracious thing you can say or do in that moment? Maybe you step up and say something. Maybe you have a culture organizationally where that's healthy. There are some organizations that aren't healthy in that way. And so what is your next step there? And that's where advice and counsel from others are helpful.
Yeah. I love that. And Eric, I feel like that's so true. And there's so much wisdom in that. I think when I think about what you were saying about looking at the other side of it and your own loyalties and where you're putting your own trust, I think that's such a good self-corrective. I was drawn to the book of Job 31, in verse 24, it says, "If I had put my trust in gold, or said to pure gold, you are my security. If I've rejoiced over great wealth, a fortune my hands have gained, if I had regarded the sun and its radiance, or the moon moving in its splendor, so that my heart was secretly enticed, and my hand offered them a kiss of homage," the loyalty there, "then these also would be sins to be judged, for I would have been unfaithful to God on high." And I'm so grateful for our standing as people who are forgiven by Jesus Christ. But this passage says, be careful what you put your trust in, and I think it's a reminder that we are to put our trust in Jesus Christ. But when we are in authority, we're almost placed in this automatic position of trust. You're just supposed to trust your authorities. You're supposed to trust Jesus in that person. And when they let you down, I think you have to look at your own heart first and say, am I trusting them more than I'm trusting Jesus? and go to an authority, go to counsel, but first go to Christ and say, Jesus, what do you want me to do here? Because I'm not seeing you displayed in this person. Am I trusting them more than I'm trusting you in this situation? And there really is a spiritual component to this trusting authority thing. Because one thing you can trust about an authority is that they're going to let you down. So, what do you do with it when they do? And if it becomes a systemic thing, if it becomes that they're walking in foolishness, like Eric was talking about, then you have a decision to make. Because it could be that if you keep placing yourself under the authority of foolishness, then there's a culpability on you, right? And so this is a really important conversation to have, especially right now, where I think so many people across the board are in jobs and under authority of people that they've never experienced COVID before. They don't know how to lead in this weird transition season that we all find ourselves in. And if anything, it's a call to trust Jesus more in it. But he might put you in a place where you're like, what do I do here? Do I have that conversation? Do I bring in a third party? Or is it time to move on?
I want to speak to this thing that we're hinting at, and it's the importance of time in this. Like the hard, awkward, angst-ridden elements of giving the Lord time to work stuff out in people and in the situation. Amy, I'm reminded of the thing that Tony often says when you do confront someone with a hard truth, that you give them grace to react in the moment and time to respond, right? So we're talking about an element of time in which the Lord could work on developing that leader's integrity, character, skill set, even all of these things. So I'd love for each of you to speak to that for a minute, either from personal experience or biblical application or both.
I love that you're talking about time because I think that what you're circling around are two different things that you have to look for. There are seasons and then there are systems. And the one thing true about seasons is that they change, right? But they can last for a while. So if you're under authority that is maybe not acting wisely, or they're confronted by a situation or a transition or something that they've never experienced before, that would warrant some time and some grace, kind of like hiding and watching and seeing what happens, speaking into them. But that would be a season that you would hope would result in change that is positive and wise. But then sometimes there are systems that you fall upon and you realize this is a broken system, that time is not going to make this thing change for the better. Matter of fact, oftentimes with systemic problems is they change for the worse. And so I think you have to ask the counselor, your good counselor, the wonderful counselor. I think you have to ask him, is this a season or is this a system? But both take time and both take waiting on the Lord.
That's a good word, Amy. And so I would add to that, I total agreement with that statement. And I love that season or system, and analyze that. And so let me take that and add another dichotomy to personalize it for you.
It has to
And,
start with an S.
okay. Be tough on the fly. But I'm thinking maybe you can think of S words. I don't know, but I'm thinking that from a personal level, you've got to look at the difference between balance and rhythm. Also, as you begin to engage conversation, you're trying to balance conversations and what to say, who to say it to. The thing with balance is you lose it. The thing with rhythm is you move to it. Enter into a season of rhythm in conversation, giving, taking, receiving, listening, hearing, having those conversations in kind of a holy rhythm, if you will, rather than trying to balance and tit for tat and one up and all these type of negative ways of communicating. You'll fall off of that. Don't try to balance things. Engage the rhythm of the season that you're in.